Our scripture passage for this week is the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 29 through 39. So hear this good news. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. So he went to her and took her hand and helped her. The fever left her, and she began to wait on them. That evening after sunset, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and the demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door, and Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons. But he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. And that's what I want you to listen to today. They knew who he was. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up and left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him. And when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone is looking for you." Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." So he traveled throughout Galilee, preaching in the synagogues and driving out demons. So there were two things in this passage that really stood out to me this week. The first one is, after Jesus had been extremely busy healing people of various diseases and casting out demons, it got to a point where he had to step away from it, and he went and found a solitary place. And notice what this Bible passage says, is that it was early in the morning before the sun came up. He left everybody behind to go find that solitary place. And it was in that solitary place, in that quiet place, that Jesus knew what he needed to do next. And that is so true about the spiritual journey for all of us. When we're caught up in the chaos of life, it's hard to know what to do next. Usually we're just trying to keep up. But if we truly want to know who we are and what we are to do next, we have to find time to go to that solitary place. And you know, I appreciate it, especially right now for young families, where you have children who are going to school at home. Both spouses are working from home. Home is a crazy place right now. And then after all of that, then you have to find time to do everything else, and to do it social distance, and to do it in ways to keep safe. It's crazy. But there's another reality too. Finding it hard to find time for that solitary place is not just for the young and the busy. But I cannot tell you how many retired persons I've asked this question, what's retirement like? And the response is consistent all the time. It's great, but to tell you the truth, I am puzzled as to when I ever had time to go to work. So regardless, if you have to work and you have small children and you're taking care of them, or if you're retired, it's difficult to find time to go to that solitary place and listen. And listen. And the reality is that we'll never find time. There will always be something demanding our attention. The reality is we have to make time and then stick to it. There's a wonderful passage I think illustrates this so profoundly. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 11 through 13. So it's a story about the great prophet Elijah. And after he had the great battle with the Queen Jezebel's god Baal and her prophets, all of her prophets were slaughtered, and Elijah now has a price on his head, and the great and powerful prophet runs away, and he's hiding in a cave, and he's lamenting that only he in all of Israel is the only one who loves God and serves God. But God had a different lesson for him while he was hiding in his cave. God then said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks into pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was, when Elijah heard it, that he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Suddenly a voice came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And that is the importance of creating time to go to that quiet, solitary place so that we can listen, so our soul can hear and our brain can become conscious of the divine spirit that is not in all the chaos surrounding us and that we're having to manage all the time, but it's in that still, small, solitary, quiet place that we hear God's voice. And God is constantly asking us, what are you doing here? What are we doing? So even Jesus had to do this. And when he did take that time early in the morning, getting away from the demands of the crowd, he knew that his place was not to do all of his work in one village, but he was to go throughout all of Galilee, teaching in the synagogues and anywhere that people would listen. The second lesson is redefining what a demon is. I talked about this some last week. But in case you didn't hear last week, we need to look at the idea of demon or evil spirit in the context in which it was written. Now, in our culture, we have the Stephen King books, we have horror stories, we have horror movies, we have haunted houses, we have these people who become possessed by these demons and are able to climb the walls and across the ceiling, they're able to do, and they do horrible things, but these are people who are possessed by something outside of themselves and they have no control over it. And it's great for imagination, but it has very little to do with one's spiritual reality. In the first century, when this scripture passage was written, it was not written in the context of Stephen King and horror movies. In the first century, anything, an illness or a mental condition that could not be diagnosed, that could not be explained, was considered to be an evil spirit or a demon. Now, what I want to do today is to start redefining what the word demon is. Look, it's in our vernacular, right? How many times have you read a biography or an autobiography or gone to a seminar where this person had accomplished these incredible things, but before they could accomplish these incredible things, they will often tell you, I had to spend time facing my what? Facing my demons, right? Now, they're not talking about otherworldly creatures that come from the pits of hell that somehow come into our bodies through our nose or our ears or our mouth. That's not what they're talking about. We have to come face to face with our demons. We have to come face to face with those things in our mind, within our psyche, that create stumbling blocks for us. There you go. The Hebrew word Satan or Satan means stumbling block. So what I want to do is propose to you another way of thinking of the demonic or the demons or the evil spirits. What if a demon or an evil spirit is something that is not occupying us from some evil world somewhere, but rather is a part of our psyche, the Greek word for soul. It's a part of our wounded self. It's our shadow self. It's that part of us that nags us. It's that part of us that sometimes compels us to do something that's unhealthy, or to think unhealthy thoughts, or to act out on those unhealthy thoughts. And it's easy to see how it feels like it's something outside of us, but what if that demon was not something that's outside that has taken over us, but it's a part of who we are at our very core? And what if it's not there to haunt us and to taunt us and to force us to do evil things, but rather it's a part of our healing. It's like a voice crying out. Something is broken here. Something needs to be tended to. It's like the child in the classroom. If the child cannot get praise and attention from positive activities, then the child will act out in ways that they're getting attention, even if it's negative attention. And I believe that that's the role that the dark side of us plays. It's not inherently evil, but it's like that wounded child crying out for help, and they will get help in any way that they can. It's like those demons or toxic thoughts and behaviors at one point in our lives may have saved us. And what I find is that people who experience childhood trauma in particular, it definitely saved them when they were a child. But those behaviors that saved them when they were a child, then as you become an adult, then they become toxic and more destructive because the demands on your life are different. The demon, I believe, is the dark side of our psyche. It's the dark side of our soul. And it is a part of us, and it loves us. And it will work with the other part of us to get our attention, to let us know that we need to slow down. It's like if you're living your life in such a way that it's out of control, and you're like the proverbial car or train getting ready to crash into the brick wall. Your soul will do something to you to keep you from hitting that wall. It can cause you to get arrested, cause you to be found out, cause you to get sick, cause you to slow. Something in your body will cause you to slow down so that you do not crash. And often we describe that as bad luck. Oh, they're possessed. Oh, these are horrible things. But what if we were to redefine and reframe what that demon or evil spirit is? If we reframed it in such a way that it is a part of us and that it's not there to haunt us and torment us, but rather to get our attention and to help us to slow down and help us to discover what's broken and what needs to be healed and what needs to be made whole within us. One of the things in the passage that really caught my attention when I read it this week was that Jesus was casting out demons and evil spirits, and Jesus would not allow them to speak because they knew who he was. Really. They knew who he was. The people that Jesus was healing and preaching to weren't conscious of who he was. But the demons, how is that? Why is that? And as I reflected on that question, these are some of the answers that I came up with. That there is a part of us that is human who lives on this planet. We walk on the earth and we eat things from the earth and we're in relationships with each other and we do things and we create things. But there's another part of us that is eternal, and that is our soul, our psyche. And your soul is eternal, and your soul knows God, and your soul knows the Spirit of Christ. There's nothing that can separate the two because they are all connected. The problem is that we're not conscious of it, you see. That's the issue. It's not that somehow we need to become a good enough person for God to be in our heart. God is already there. For many of us, we're so busy, we're so caught up, and maybe caught up even acting out and doing unhealthy things that we don't have the capacity to be conscious of that incredible spirit that is there. So it seems to me that the demons or the shadow or the dark side of our psyche knew who Jesus was even before the people who were coming to him were conscious of it. Because it's eternal. There's a part of us that is eternal. It always knows. And the challenge for us in this life is to become more conscious of it and live in that place. I shared with you last week, and some of you know that when I was a child, I was traumatized with abuse and from my maternal grandfather. And I developed a behavior as a child that saved me. And that behavior is dissociative behavior. And what I learned how to do as a child is function, sit in my classroom at school, do my homework, take my tests, read my books. And I was able to function in that world, but I was not wholly and completely there. I lived in a pretend world. In my pretend world, you see, there was no abuse. In my pretend world, I always knew how things were going to work out. In my pretend world, in my dissociative world, there were no surprises. And that's where I felt safe. And I was able to create that by drawing and doodling. I drew and doodled my way all the way through elementary school and junior high school, college, and graduate school. Because that's what I would do when I was uncomfortable or I felt pressure. See? That ability to disassociate and go into my pretend world saved me as a child. And the reality is that I had suppressed what happened to me in that trauma so deep in my psyche that I was not even conscious it was there when I was an adult. Until, in my mid-30s, I started getting flashbacks and body memory about things that were crazy. I was scared out of my mind. I thought that I was possessed. And if I had not been monotheistic at that time, I probably thought maybe something did possess me. But my soul knew there was a point in my life where I was going to have to deal with that trauma. And it was at age 35 that it says, okay, I think he's ready to handle it now. And then that's when my journey of healing started. But here's the problem with the dissociative behavior. It saved me as a child, but it started interfering with my ability to be a responsible adult. You see? And one day, this is right before I started getting help. One day I remember I was standing in church and I was preaching, and I was doing it responsibly. I was doing it just like I do before you every week. But somehow I had split away from myself, and I could see I was standing over here, watching me over here doing the sermon. And over here, I knew I was taking care of business, so I went into that little French cafe in Paris while I was drinking rich coffee and reading the paper, you see, because that was where my pretend world was. You see. Vive la France. But I started missing meetings, and I started not being present and understanding it started becoming toxic. So along with the flashbacks and along with that revelation, oh my God, what am I doing here? What are you doing here? I started getting help. And as I got help, I started mending what was broken. And as I started mending what was broken, I did not need dissociative behavior. You see? So if you find yourself a person who deals with sickness all the time, or addiction, or phobias, or unhealthy belief systems, unhealthy choices and behavior and actions, ask yourself why. What is going on inside of me that I keep doing these things even when I don't want to? Why? And the only way that you're going to discover the answers to those questions, if you go to that solitary place, which is your inner self, where your soul is, that's where you discover who you are and what you are here to do and what you need to recover from, you see. My demon was something that saved me as a child, but it was something I had to let go as an adult. As I had worked through those years of counseling and group sessions and individual sessions, I finally got to a place where I had worked through the trauma and the damage that it caused and started to change and recreate myself and live in the present moment and feel safe in the present moment. And that's when I asked my counselor this question. You know, I have very vivid dreams. I wonder if they're telling me anything. And he smiled and he says, oh, yes, they are. He He says, I know someone who has studied Jung and does Jungian psychology and dream work. And he connected me, and I started working with that person. And then it wasn't long after that that Stephen and Karen Berwick introduced me to a friend of theirs named Bob Marston, who also was well-read and understood Jungian theology and also dream work and how it worked. And Bob was a tremendous resource for me in the next part of my journey. Isn't it amazing that when your soul has dealt with one thing and you're conscious of it, then your soul opens you up to another whole realm of possibilities, you see? It's the way it works. It's the way it works. And as I studied Jungian Jungian psychology, and doing dream work, I discovered how the inner self is working. In a dream, there are three main characters in your dream. There's the anima, which is feminine, the animus, which is masculine, and then your shadow self, which is both the protagonist or the antagonist and your spiritual guide. If you're a man, typically the main character in your dream is a woman because it's the balance of the masculine and the feminine. If you're a woman, typically the main character in your dream is a man because it's the same, it's the balance. However, your shadow self usually appears to you in the same gender. And your shadow self is there to haunt you if you need it, to scare you if you need it, to do whatever it takes to get you to wake up and ask the question, oh my God, what am I doing here? And as I started this process, I came across this story in one of the books that I read that I think explains beautifully how this all works. And it will help also to assist you on reframing on how you think about your shadow self or your evil self or your dysfunctional self. Because our tendency is to suppress it and set it aside, try to hide it in the closet or under the rug or in the cellar or the attic. The story goes like this. There was a man who had this recurring dream quite often. He is in the middle of a battle in World War II. He's an American soldier. And he looks over and he sees a German soldier coming after him to kill him. And he realizes he has no weapons. So he runs. And knowing the trenches and the tunnels and the maze of it all, he's confident that he'll be able to escape. And so he runs and he runs. He's looking back and the soldier is still chasing him. He's running and running. And then suddenly he looks back and he's not there. And he thinks, oh, I lost him. And then as he turns the next corner, there he is right in front of his eyes, staring him straight in the eyes. And as he's staring him straight in the eyes, the soldier takes a knife and stabs him in the gut. And at that point, he wakes up. He wakes terrified, exhausted, horrible nightmare. And it kept happening over and over and over again. And then this particular person started to realize that he was living a very destructive life. And it's been going on for a long time, and now it's all starting to catch up to him. The bottom line is he was living a double life. And so he did the healthiest thing as he sought help. And as he was going through his counseling, his counselor helped him to know that it's your secret that's a part of the disease. You have to find the courage to tell your wife and your children about your secret life and what you're doing now to heal it. And he took that risk. And of course, his wife and his children were horrified, and they were heartbroken, and they felt incredibly betrayed. But they decided as a family, as long as you are doing your work and getting your help and creating change in your life, we will stick with you. But if you go back to that other life, we're all out of here. And so he did his work, and he continued to do his work, and he started finding and discovering that he had trauma that he had not dealt with, and this secret life was a way for him to medicate that trauma and not to deal with it. And as he dealt with the trauma, and as he dealt with the behaviors, he started living in the present. He started becoming a healthier, more whole human being. And his family stayed together, and it all worked out well, and then he had that dream. After all this time, he had that dream. And it's the same as all the other dreams. There he was in the trench, and the battle was raging all around him, and the enemy soldiers started chasing him, and he started running, and he was running through all the maze of the trenches and going through the tunnels, hoping to be able to elude him. And then finally he stops, and he doesn't see him, and he turns the corner, and there he is. There's the soldier, the enemy soldier, looking him in the eyes once again. But this time the dream ended differently. Instead of the enemy soldier taking a knife and stabbing him in the stomach, the enemy soldier took and embraced him and held him. And he described it as not just a hug, but like a real hug and an embrace that lasted what seemed to be forever. And then they stopped hugging. The soldier looked him in the face and says, "I love you," and then walked away. And the man never had the dream again. You see, in his unhealthy mind and broken soul, he thought the enemy was there to destroy him, but the enemy in reality was there to save him. The shadow, the antagonist, became his spiritual guide. And that's why I felt compelled to share with you today, to look at that story in this way, to help you to see that what we might consider as demonic or possession or destruction, or why is that part in me? Because that part is you, but it's the broken you, and it desperately wants you to find wholeness and healing, and it will do whatever it takes to help you to come to your senses and see that God is not in the mighty wind that's able to break rocks, and God is not in the earthquake, and God was not in the fire, but God was in the still small voice that pulls you out of your cave into the light, into the present moment, into wholeness, and then asks you the question, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And I shared this story with Amy the other night, and her response was, some days I wrestle with my demons, and some days we cuddle. I thought, oh my God, that sums it up beautifully. Where did you get that? She says, I saw it on a t-shirt. So there you go. It's a truth that is profound and it's deep, and you can also find it on a t-shirt. It's everywhere. You are a beautiful soul created in the image of the divine, and all of us in some way have something that has been damaged or hurt or broken. But that broken part is not there to destroy us, but rather to grab our attention, to help us to become conscious of who we are, what needs to be healed and repaired and made whole. And it knows Jesus and it knows God, because that's the eternal part of us that can never be separated from either one. It can never be separated from either one. I tell you from what I know is true. So use your imagination. Ask yourself the questions. Do not be afraid, but ask, why is this going on? Why do I do this? What purpose is this behavior or this thinking doing in my life? And where do I need help? Where do I need to step out of the chaos? Where do I need to find that solitary place that brings me back to wholeness, completeness, so that I can fully be who I am, which is a full expression of the divine in you. Thus ends the lesson. God bless you all on your journey, and I'm here to help you if you need it. Call, text, email, and I'll be there for you. And we can see each other face to face. Meet me in my office. I'm happy to help you on this journey. Peace to you all. God bless you. Amen.